able to join us today for our webinar. I am pleased to be joined by Rolf Kraus, VP of Content Management, Portals, and Collaboration Practice at eDynamic. And we're going to have a discussion around how to increase revenue with a unified digital engagement strategy. Hey, Rolf, how are you?
Great, Bob. I'm glad to join you today.
All right, so I'm going to sort of kick this off with just a little bit of information about the webinar. So we are monitoring the Twitter hashtag #EctronUnified. So if you have any questions, comments, or even answers that you want to suggest, put them in there. In fact, we will also put our answers in there as well. Just getting some feedback on the line here. Let me see if that has addressed it. So I'm just going to muscle through this. So I hope it's not too distracting. I have a little bit of an echo on the line. The other way that you are able to ask questions is a Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. So if you have questions, we'll also monitor that as well. All right, so we are going to start things off. I'm going to talk a little bit about connecting content to revenue and what that means for customer experience management. Rolf will then give a great story around creating a unified engagement strategy, and then I will end things with Ectron's Digital Experience Hub and a demonstration. Real simple way that you guys could utilize what we're talking about today, a unified experience strategy. So a little bit about Ectron. We were founded in 1998, really to empower organizations to utilize their digital marketing potential and connect content to revenue. And I'll explain a little bit about that in 1 second. We're headquartered in Nashville, New Hampshire, about 270 employees, and we power some of the biggest websites. All right. So one of the things that I've noticed over the years, and as I kind of tell this story, a lot of people have concurred with me, and it's really revenue is the business driver right now. So if you had to ask what projects are going to be funded, what projects are going to be canceled, the ones that can show an impact on revenue, the ones that continue forward, and vice versa. So it's probably no surprise. I'm just going to kind of roll through these stats that the vast majority of management's looking for better visibility. CEOs are looking to track revenue. It's just an interesting quote from Bain talking about how executives are overwhelmingly looking at revenue as the most critical priority. So much more than cost containment, much more than efficiency and those sorts of measurements. So it's very clear revenue is what's driving business right now. And so how do we generate business? Well, we want to generate the most positive business outcomes, right? So and a business outcome is measurable activity that would have a quantifiable impact, right? So increasing your brand awareness allows you to charge more money for your product. Having more customers is an obvious one, or increasing conversions. You're in the association or nonprofit space, having more donations. So the types of business outcomes would change, but generating business outcomes is really what's going to lead to this revenue. So how do we generate these business outcomes? Well, we take a new approach to connecting content to revenue. So if we look at this, one of the really great pieces of news here is that most organizations are already generating content, right? So you're out there, you're creating, marketing material, you're creating thought leadership, you're blogging, you're creating, different parts of your website, landing pages, microsites, and so that's already out there. You're already investing money in that. If we add to that context, right, so if we understand who the person is, what's driving them, and a little bit of information about, what's going to entice them, we can create an experience, right? So we can give them the right information at the right time through the website, right? So if we combine context and content together, we can help generate experiences. Once we generate these experiences, through analytics tools, through trial and error, we can optimize it so that we're actually providing the most optimized experience for the site visitor. And finally, once we do this in sort of a virtuous cycle, we're able to increase the business outcomes. And so this is really the model that we use at Ectron. It's how we think about our marketing, and so it's kind of fun to work at a company where we get to build technology that helps our customers do this, but also get to use this technology ourselves as marketers. All right, so with that setup, I'm going to turn the baton over to Rolf so that he can walk you through how to generate a strategy that will allow you to do these things.
Thank you, Bob. I want to pick up where Bob has left off around business outcomes and generating revenue, because what we do at eDynamic really is right around that. We're focused on driving customer acquisition and retention. So the focus of our organization is really to take a look at the strategies that we can wrap around both existing and new technologies within organizations to have you acquire more customers. That leads to conversion to sales of product, to tax revenue if you're a .gov, to make sure people are doing the right thing. If you're a .org, maybe that's increase in the funds that are coming in. So we work across the board with both profit and nonprofit organizations to really drive that. For today, we're going to start off with just trying to make some sense of the word engagement. That's a word that's been tossed around a lot, and a lot of people have different meanings for that. And we'll dig into what that means to us and our customers today. We'll spend some time looking at what capabilities you need to actually drive engagement, and to look at what we call a digital marketing capabilities model, where we begin to look at those capabilities and identify where you fit into a maturity curve and where there may be gaps, and what things to address first. And then we start looking at the capabilities themselves from a technology perspective. So making sense of engagement. There's been a lot of talk about engagement lately as being the thing that people want to measure. If you're talking about analytics anymore, obviously, things have shifted from clicks to things much more sophisticated when people talk about engagement. So a lot of folks here are talking about, what it really means to get a customer, a client, a prospect engaged with your organization. And here's a few folks that talk about, what it really means, that deep level of connection, actually getting people to bond with your brand, and there's a variety of other things that we'll discover here shortly what that means. Forrester has developed a really great model to talk about engagement. It's a way for us as a thought framework to begin to think about what that means to us as an organization and how we can act on this information. And they break it down into kind of 4 different areas. One is involvement, how people get involved in your site. And that really is back to the things like being able to click and engage and basically interact with your site from a brand perspective, how they interact from a brand perspective. Then they have just interaction. So we're talking about various touch points in which people would be within your site. So that could be you're filling out a form, they are submitting that, they're beginning to share some of themselves with you. It's that deep interaction that we're talking about. Finally, as we move into, once we get that involvement and interaction, now we're looking at things like intimacy. How close do people feel to your brand? And that eventually leads to influence, in which people begin to recommend your brand to others. So with that in mind, we begin to take a look at what we have here from an engagement perspective: involvement, interaction, intimacy, and influence. Again, involvement, thinking about the click-throughs, how much time are people spending on your site, how many visits, perhaps if you have a retail store and you can tie that information together, how often they visit your store. And these, in many cases, are all measurable items. In other words, we can wrap analytics around it, and we can tell what the level of engagement is that a person has with us from a digital perspective. Then we've got interaction. So now they take it a step further. Now they're actually, as we said earlier, they're filling out the form. They're requesting that white paper. They're leaving comments, and they're now truly beginning to interact with what you have on your site in more of a dialogue. And so again, we can measure those items, and those, when they go in and they download that white paper, we can find out exactly what they downloaded. Again, providing us insight. Then we move to intimacy. You know, their preference of your brand over someone else's. And perhaps they have a choice, they've made a decision, they come back to you to buy or to engage your services. And then finally, converting that into someone that can influence others to do the same. So this is we found this to be a very solid model in terms of looking at what engagement is, how to measure engagement, and then just kind of intuitively understanding what it is that people need to do on our website, with our emails, with kiosks that we might have in a retail environment, what it is that they need to do with our digital assets. Let's take a look at what the capabilities are that we need to support the engagement. And one of the things that we've come up with at eDynamic is what we call a capabilities model. We look at a variety of different components that support not only engagement, but your overall digital strategy. We've got what we call integrated channels, and we'll delve into that a bit. We've got demand generation, user experience, relevance, analytics, optimization, and the customer view. We believe these 6 things come together and are brought to bear to really make up, if you will, the DNA of a digital ecosystem. And what we're going to take a look at now is really get a better understanding of where those support the engagement model that we talked about from Forrester. So things like integrated channels, which are the ability for people to engage with you across web, email, we mentioned kiosks, and perhaps there's a variety of other channels like mobile and communities that you might have that you want that engagement. Getting those integrated means that they're no longer individual silos where you may have one department in your organization worried about and concerned about the website, another department concerned about sending out email. We're talking about bringing those together into a unified way of messaging to people and engaging with people. Then we have demand generation. There's a lot that fits into that bucket. Everything from SEO to inbound marketing and outbound marketing, which involves things like email, again, touching some of the integrated channels, and then also things like lead nurturing, how we approach the process of demand generation. User experience, we all have an understanding of that, you know, good design, great information architecture, and that applies across all of these steps because it's there to support our brand and also to support how people interact with us. Then we have something called relevance, and what that really means in the end is how well we will engage with that person specific to their needs and their desires at that point in time when they come to your website or when they receive that email from you. How relevant is that communication to them? And then how do we get to that relevance that we aspire to? Analytics and optimization, that might be obvious. Everyone knows about web analytics, Google, Omniture, and those tools. But now we're beginning to take it another level further, and we want to begin to gauge and measure things like intimacy and influence through, for instance, social networks. And then finally, we've got the customer view. And the customer view ties into a variety of things here. It ties into relevance and analytics and the user experience and also the integrated channel. What that really means is that we're looking for a single view of the customer. So as we collect information across all of these channels, it's all brought to bear in a single view, which we can then act on to create that relevant content, to adjust and optimize the experience for the customer. So this is, again, looking at the model both from the engagement perspective and then from the capabilities model. So let's take a deeper dive on the capabilities model. Capabilities models, as you know, models in general help us think about our world in a much more concrete way. Things that become intangible, we move them into a model so we can talk about them in a common way. So this is no different than this capabilities model. We're talking about the variety of things that people might experience through a maturity curve, meaning that you might start out as an organization that has a website. Later you invest in marketing automation, and they may be independent platforms that are working. And then in the future, you bring them together to create a unified messaging and analytics. And so there's kind of a path that most organizations take. Some paths are straight, some are more zigzag. And we begin to take a look at where we might fit into this model. So over here to the left, we've got things starting off with basic user experience, basic demand gen, and then to the right side, we get more sophisticated user experience, meaning that information architecture and design that may be targeted to specific segments and roles and audiences coming to your website, where we do cross-channel analytics versus just looking at the website. As we look down below, we may start off with those standalone platforms. You start with a CMS or web platform, then move to email automation or marketing automation. But as we move up, we begin to bring those together to create a personalized experience across all those channels, and then also provide this cross-channel integration that's based on that single view of the customer. So let's take a closer look at the maturity model in the context of where people are, where organizations are, and where they may go to. And one of the things that we do with our customers is, you see the chart on the left side, we begin to map how strong they believe they are with respect to various, do a survey and begin to understand from our perspective how strong they are. And we begin to see the gaps. We now have a point of reference and something to talk about where we can begin to lay some groundwork of where to take the customer and where to improve based on strategy. So let's take a look at where people might start with. We call it basic digital. It's kind of like basic cable. You get your basic things, you start with a website, you may have a static site and you decide, well, we need to get email, or you might start with CMS. People start with either. They begin to do email. We call it spray and pray at this level. It's typically not very targeted. If it is, it's broken down in just a few segments, but it doesn't get personal. We're not talking about relevance here yet. We're talking about maybe just some light segmentation. Then, of course, web design, everyone wants a good-looking site, but we may not yet have introduced really solid best practices around information architecture. And then, of course, for analytics, everyone wants to know how many people have come to my site, how many people have opened my email. But we still don't understand about the level of engagement people have with our brand. So that's really where we're headed toward, is understanding that level of engagement and getting to that level of engagement. So as we move through the maturity curve, we may then begin to look at what are the next things people do. Think of it as a path in a garden. What's that next step you're going to take, and where is it going to lead you? What we find is that next step is people invest more money in things that they can actually see, which is user experience. So they improve their user experience, they get more sophisticated about their analytics, and they begin to broaden their analysis and begin to think more about demand generation as well. SEO becomes important, SEM, thinking about how they will leverage keywords both on their website and then tie that back perhaps with email. And so they begin to get a broader understanding of how to do demand generation, both with their website and with their email. As people move further down that maturity curve, now we begin to get that next step of sophistication. People start reading articles about things like content relevance and contextual content. And they begin to ask the question, how do we do that? And so now we're thinking about not only improving the user experience, but really beginning to drive relevance through personalization. Personalizations across, or I should say within, the web channel, and personalization within the email channel. But you may not have personalization across those channels yet. They may still be fairly independent, but at least we're now getting to the point where we are segmenting at a much finer level, where we might be talking to not only industries, but we may be talking to roles within that industry, maybe resolving it down to business problems and so that people have, and begin writing content and images and other white papers, and so we can be very directive and prescriptive in our engagement with people. The next step is really more that nirvana step, and where we get to the point where we've now expanded analytics across all channels, and so we get a broad view of how that email affected the traffic on the site, and how that eventual download of that white paper led to the next event they registered for, and then finally how that all resolves into the maturity of that prospect into a lead that we finally can hand to a salesperson so they can act on it. But that only comes as we begin to get much more sophisticated, where the channels are integrated, and what that means is that email is aware of the website and vice versa. There's a common view of the customer, meaning that when someone enters something offline through Salesforce.com and someone updated a form on Marketo or Eloqua, and that information is captured. When you were in your Electron or other CMS and someone clicked on some items there, all of that information gets collected and is made available to all the other platforms so that they then can make choices to present the appropriate information, send the appropriate email to drive that dialogue and that engagement forward. So let's take a closer look at how we take the capabilities and really think about kind of where the rubber meets the road from a technology perspective. And then also think about how to organize that technology with strategy. So typically what we like to look at is content management. Obviously, Electron is a leading content management firm, and they play a big role in this. We also look at marketing automation, which is steps beyond just email automation in allowing us to do things like lead scoring, so you know when to hand that lead off to the sales team. It allows us to do lead nurturing, where we begin to engage people over a long period of time, weeks to months, and nurture them, kind of lead farming. And then we also look at analytics, because across those platforms, both content management and marketing automation, we want to be able to capture this information and act on it. We want it to guide us and to help us optimize the content, what content is doing well. Where do we need to optimize content? People are searching for this, but we don't have this content. We need that type of analytics to give us that insight. And then social and community. As we broaden our reach, we talked about influence earlier. This is the mechanism by which most people influence others about your brand. And then finally, CRM kind of completes the picture, because you need a place to store information about the customer that will be eventually acted on by other parts of the organization, particularly the sales organization. So as we begin to look at this, technology really is only part of the puzzle here. And we at eDynamics spend a lot of time working with organizations early on from a strategy perspective before we even talk about technology. Technology is almost the easy part to talk about initially, because it's a lot more tangible. But what we want to understand is how you engage with your customers. What type of customers you have. right? Let's make sure we're talking to them correctly. We want to make sure that as they come from email and then onto the website, that it's a seamless conversation, that people aren't saying, hey, you sent me this email, it says this, and now I come here, and you're speaking to me in a very different way. The other thing is irrelevant conversation. I received this email, and it has no meaning to me. So what we really want to do is create context, who is that person, and then relevance of making sure we're getting the right things to the right people. So part of that is working with your team, so marketing, with sales, other SMEs or subject matter experts within your organization. We'll learn about things like the buying cycle. How does your customer buy your services? If you are a nonprofit, how do they finally engage with you and decide to donate money? You know, there's very little difference, because what we're looking at is how people think about your organization and finally make a commitment to your brand and actually spend money with you. We take a look at things like the segments. Who do you speak with? You know, what are the pain points and motivators? And we begin to overlay those into a model. That finally allows us to kind of break out kind of contextual content. We have different segments, pain points, roles that we might address, and we map content to that. Finally, things like lead disposition. How do we know when we do get a lead in, how to act on it? Are we ready to hand that to a salesperson? We build models around that get implemented in the marketing automation technology. But all of that really is about driving this, as Bob had talked about, this virtuous cycle, you know, where we can speak with people across all channels in a common way. And this goes back to why we call it unified engagement rather than, you know, web engagement plus email engagement. Really, we're looking to do a unified engagement across all these channels. You know, we have spent a lot of time at eDynamic building technology bridges, these integrations between email automation, marketing automation, CRM, and we've done this for drive engagement significantly through this level of content sharing and a common view of the customer. But I tell you, it's a very difficult job. And so what we're excited about is when we learned about Ectron's Digital Experience Hub. Now, what they have done at Ectron is pretty amazing from the standpoint they've taken a really strategic approach to the problem of getting these various systems to work together. And they actually saw the same problem that we did at eDynamic. It's like, you know, we go and speak with customers, and they've got Ectron. And they also have Eloqua, or they have Marketo, or they might have Sugar CRM. But they want these tools to work together to achieve that level of engagement we spoke about earlier. How do we do that? What they've done here is provided a platform that's kind of plug and play, where the content management system is just another spoke on the hub, and where we're able to plug in the various tools and share the information, see a common view of the customer, and have various events and actions actually trigger actions in the other systems, which is very powerful. Imagine that people have certain behaviors on your website, and then that lets the email system know that 2 days from now, please follow up with this email. And that's the type of integration we're talking about. And what this really does for us is achieve what we were looking for, which is getting those integrated channels, pulling in demand generation, so SEO, SEM from a web perspective, pulling in email marketing and marketing automation, okay? From a user experience perspective, being able to drive personalization that's based on information that sits outside of the CMS. So imagine now if someone is updating a form, and that form happens to be in SilverPop or happens to be in ExactTarget or Eloqua, and information is stored there, wouldn't it be great to personalize your website based on information stored in those platforms? And that's exactly what we're talking about here, really driving that higher level of relevance through personalization by being able to see into these other platforms and acting on this information. And that goes then back to analytics, getting a broad view of the analytics, and then that single customer view. So it's a very exciting time for us to be able to leverage that. So I'm going to hand this back over to Bob, and he's going to take you through this even further and tell you more about this.
Thanks, Rolf. I mean, this is it's one of the reasons why I like working with the Dynamics so much. Is they look at the person and not the systems and not the company, right? So they're looking at as a customer or as a prospect or a lead is interacting with their clients. What information is necessary to make that experience, the best experience that it could be? What information is necessary to help provide the right context to that site visitor, for example, or email recipient, or person on the other end of a sales phone call? And so as he eloquently put together the Digital Experience Hub, I'm just going to skip right ahead to that, really allows us to utilize the systems and information that's out there. And one thing just to notice, I mean, as this Digital Experience Hub has evolved for Ectron, as we've seen the power of the systems that we're able to connect to and to utilize this information, you've seen more and more spokes on our hub over time. So even looking at the diagram Rolf had versus the diagram we have here, we can see there's already more spokes on the hub. But again, it really comes down to, when we think about it, if you work for a web content management provider, you think you're in the middle of the world and everything sort of revolves around you, or if you work for marketing automation or a CRM provider, it's the same thing. But at the end of the day, right down here in the middle is the actual customer, and they're the ones who are going to decide something for your company based on their experience or not, right? And they're not thinking your website is any different from talking to a salesperson on the phone or receiving an email. So really, as Rolf had mentioned earlier, this whole concept of having a continuous experience across these integrated channels definitely becomes very important. And so let's look at how we go about that. So if we look at Digital Experience Hub in the middle, right, we have a flow, right? So we have a landing page on Ectron. This one happens to be on Ectron.com. You fill it out just like any landing page. The goal of this is to try to convert a website visitor into a name in our database, right? Now we can, as marketers, we can all argue, is it a lead, is it a name, is it a prospect or whatever, but it's at least somebody that showed an interest in something at Ectron. And then it goes into Marketo in this instance. And so now there's a record, there's activity, right, associated with this. There's a whole bunch of rules that are running against this at this point in time, right? Looking at demographic information, who is this person, what's their title, looking at firmographic information, what type of company does he work for, looking at behavioral information, what else did he do besides fill out this form, and so on, trying to score it, trying to see if it is ready for sales, trying to put it into the right nurturing campaigns and tracks, which then, if we take information that we know could be associated with a person, so in this case, we know that they are not a customer, for example. What we're going to want to do is try to retarget some information on our website based on, in this case, the Marketo information that's stored in the Marketo database, and then change maybe this offer on the front page of our website, right? So if you're a customer, you might see, come to our user group meeting. If you're a prospect, obviously you're going to see that this analyst piece that speaks very highly of Ectron. And so the information is going to change depending upon the type of person you are. All right, so let me drag this in here, and I'll just show you guys just a real quick demonstration of this. Switch to the, all right, so here is just a website. It's the demonstration website we've created. I'm going to tie it to Marketo. All right, so it's tied to Marketo. And I'm just going to register for the newsletter here. All right. So as we can see, it's just a standard website. We have, a couple different, elements here. We have a main area kind of showing some of the products. We have a few offer areas down here trying to get us into different parts of the site. So I signed up. I should receive an email. All right. All right, Gmail. All right, so there's always more than one way to run a demo. So let me look at one that I've trashed, archived. All right. So in this case, we're not getting our email. I don't know why it's not going all the way through. Let me try. One more thing here. All right. We'll try one more thing just to, yep, of course. So it's in my spam folder, and the reason why this has happened is it's actually quite simple. We just don't have the servers. So when you send an email out of a market automation system, you have to set up certain settings on the server, and because this is a demo site, obviously it's not set up to go right to that one. So anyway, so here we are. I've opened it. We can see that I can go over to the EchoVision homepage again from here, and let me just try. And what will happen is, so right now, Marketo behind the scenes is processing that I've opened the email, and it's moving me into an active participant campaign. And so when I refresh this, take a couple seconds for it to go through, we'll see that the offer on the main area is going to change. So now it says take 10% off EchoMaster, right? So it knows I'm an active participant, I have some interest, and now the offer is going to change on the website. And we can take this chain further and further. So, if I click on the offer, it puts me into a, interested in 10% off type of campaigns and start building a profile around me as a potential buyer. So this really just gives us a sense for, just a simple integration that you can do. And just to kind of highlight a point that I really like about the way Dynamic builds up this model from their maturity model perspective is, start simple. Start with some things that you can easily do, like, for example, this type of offer. Get some maturity, get some understanding of how these things work, what's influencing your customers, and get more and more complex over time. All right. All right, so just, I like to end all the presentations I do with this. I mean, really, our goal as marketers, our goal as, people who work for organizations is to help those organizations achieve their business outcomes. And so, this is one way that we can do it. It's also, in my opinion, one of the best ways for us to take what already exists, our organizations, our tools that we have, our methodologies, and really incrementally increase the output from it, right? So, just a little bit of personalization on a website, right, what we're talking about here, can result in a 15% or more increase in conversions, right? And so you don't have to create a whole bunch of new content, you don't have to create a whole bunch of new people in your organization, but you're able to get more out of what you're doing, and that's what this is all about. So with that, I will open up the floor to questions. All right, so the first question is, how do I prevent sending too much of the same content to customers across email and web? I think that probably has to do with like duplication, maybe the same offers on your website or same things that are being emailed out. Rolf, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that that again goes back to the spray and pray and how we engage with the client. Are we approaching them as individuals, or are we hoping that the right message gets to the right person in a very general sense? And I think this goes back to being able to really segment your customers, begin to understand them, and be much more precise in sending the relevant information. And then being much more disciplined around how often information is sent to them. And this goes back to leveraging a lot of the new contemporary email tools like the marketing automation tools that provide a lot more control over when the email is sent out, how often it's sent out, and they're from an email perspective looks like. And then, of course, syncing that up, as you just showed, with the information on your website. So there is that unified level of engagement that we're looking for across those platforms.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I mean, one of the things that we do, so obviously we have multiple different types of nurturing that we do with our prospects and our customers to try to get them relevant information that's good for them at the time they are in their buying process. But a real simple way of not providing them with duplicate information is if somebody downloads a white paper from our website and that white paper is part of a nurturing track, we will skip that nurturing step and go to the next step. They've already received that content. Let's get them something else that might be more interesting to them at the time. And so that's one way that we've been able to handle that.
Yeah, it's a great example.
All right. The next question is, I like the idea of presenting the right content to the right person. What are some easy ways to get started? I think that's sort of what we've been kind of going over here. But Ralph, I don't know if you have any quick wins.
Yeah, I think often where we start with organizations that have some clear understanding who their segments are, whether it's a B2B or a B2C. And the marketing team for just an hour or two, and you've got a pretty good understanding. I think taking that basic information around just classic market segment analysis and using that to do some simple targeting of content on your website. Now, whether you use personalization or just the way you organize the content on your website from an information architecture perspective, making sure that people realize, oh, if I go here and click on this, they're speaking to me, and that section of content is for me. Simple things like that can be done very quickly, and they offer a lot of value with a little bit of investment.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to a real, simple live world example. Let me see if I can I'm going to try 2 demos in one webinar. I don't know if this has been attempted before, but let's just show real simple on Ectron.com. One of the things that we utilize is beyond market automation, we also use a product called Demand Base, which gives us some information about the person who is at our site. So, for example, because it knows that I've come from a software company, it's showing Microsoft and Dell as our customers here, among others. I mean, you don't want to be overly aggressive with it, but it also knows that I'm not a customer because I haven't logged in, right? So Marketo I haven't filled out a form on the site recently. I've cleared my cookies, and so Marketo doesn't know that I'm already in the system, so it's showing me sort of that offer that I was telling you guys about earlier. So if I come in from a healthcare company, it's going to show here in the logo. So it really gives just a real simple way of adding some context or utilizing context to provide the best content to the visitor, most relevant. All right, switch back. All right, so that one went a little smoother. All right, so next question. How much would it cost to get started? I want to be able to use Eloqua and SFD, Salesforce.com on my website, or data on my website. So So Ralph, I don't know if you can kind of put it in relative terms. I mean, I think, from my perspective, these sort of open-ended questions kind of leave us, guessing at, how big the organization is, how big is the website, how much data, you're looking at, how many web pages. But, I mean, what just from a perspective of, just getting started, I mean, how do, if we're looking at budgeting, how do we factor it in against our overall spend, say, for example, versus giving, dollar values?
Right. I would say that as you go and think about the value that this provides, if you can get the lift that we talked about, the 10 to 15% lift to your top-line growth, if you are driving that amount of business through your website to begin with, if it is driving the lead flow, then these type of activities can be very significant into your overall strategy. And the other thing, there's a lot of value to be gained in terms of the amount of effort. So let's talk about this for a moment. So in terms of, a lot of folks already have CRM. They're already using that in one way or another. Tools like Eloqua, Marketo, and other marketing automation tools they're not new, but they're definitely newer to a lot of folks than things like CMS are. And there's the nice thing about those platforms, people can engage with them small. They're a SaaS-based tool typically, and from a few $100s a month to a few $1,000s a month, you'll have a very solid platform with which to work with already. But now, talking about getting this to work holistically, if you have a budget every year, which you're spending, perhaps tens of thousands of dollars to kind of move your website forward, I'd say you might be spending anywhere from 10 to 20% of that, maybe upwards of 30 at least initially, to get going the first couple of years, and then move it into a track in which it's more about optimize, analyze, and optimize, where once we've got the tools in place, the levers, if you will, to do the personalization, and then we begin to understand our customer. Now it's a matter of revisiting, have our customers changed? Are they buying differently? Do we have new customers? And then beginning to roll that in to drive the overall engagement through these platforms. So I'd definitely say it can be as high as 30, maybe even 40% that first year to get going of your total spend, but then it tapers off into maybe the 10 to 20%, because a lot of that can be put back onto your shoulders in updating the content and being able to understand how to leverage the information taken from analytics and using that to optimize your approach.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, Ralph. I also kind of liken it to, every year that goes by that I didn't start that workout regimen that I wanted to start.
Absolutely.
Is another year, where I'm not going to be where I want to be next year. And so, when we look at developing nurture programs, we look at integrating, what's going on in Salesforce into our website, and trying to get that extra, lift out of our content. The longer it takes to start, the longer it's going to take to get results. And so,
absolutely.
So I agree with that. Great. Well, I think that's a great answer, great way to end the webinar. So, there's a little bit going on Twitter. If you guys want to reach out to us, through that Ectron Unified hashtag, that'd be great, or pound Ectron. Here is Rolf and my contact information, and I'll speak for Rolf, but I mean, if you guys want to reach out to me, that's great. I'd be happy to, even if it's just around, some of the ways that we've integrated our various systems together at Ectron. I'd be happy to answer those questions, and then Rolf's information is here too. I'm sure he would not mind being reached out to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob.
All right, well, thank you for joining us. Hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Take care. Bye.